They called me crazy for dreaming big. Now they call me boss every morning. They never saw the vision. Not because it was invisible, but because it wasn't made for their eyes. My ideas didn't shimmer like a product on a shelf or dazzle like a flashy car in a showroom. No. They were raw, unruly blueprints scribbled in midnight silence, chiseled out of caffeine-fueled solitude and the kind of hope only the stubborn carry. I remember the echo of their laughter bouncing off the chipped bricks of our neighborhood walls, how their disbelief cloaked every word of advice they tossed like crumpled paper, unsolicited, heavy with resignation. Be realistic, they said, with the smug confidence of the perpetually mediocre, as if ambition were a costume you grew out of. People like us don't get that far, they muttered, over beers they couldn't afford, seated in cracked lawn chairs, gazing at a future they'd already surrendered. I didn't argue. I didn't waste breath debating with small minds who measured success by weekend parties and high scores on mobile games. Every time I turned down a Friday night invite to stay hunched over code or financial models, they rolled their eyes like I was reciting a fantasy. I had no trust fund, no rich uncle slipping me startup capital. What I had was the unsettling certainty that the world was a puzzle I was meant to solve, and I wasn't going to let it stay scrambled, just because no one else had the patience to piece it together. I lived on instant noodles and blind faith, tracing software wireframes on napkins that would later morph into interfaces polished enough to impress venture capitalists who had never heard of my zip code. I worked out of coffee shops that charged more for their lattes than I had in my bank account. I scoured forums, siphoning knowledge from threads posted years ago, cobbling together frameworks while others scrolled social media like it was scripture. The world wasn't waiting to hand me anything, so I built it myself, brick by digital brick. Behind the scenes, while they were caught in the dopamine loops of likes and retweets, I was in rooms they couldn't imagine, quietly rubbing shoulders with suits who only cared about numbers and execution. I didn't talk much. I let prototypes speak in code and performance metrics. I sold ideas before I had the resources to build them, and then used the confidence I'd faked to raise the capital I needed. Each no from an investor felt like another page in the manual I was writing on, how to outlast people who never believed in me. And the beauty of being underestimated is that you can maneuver in silence, drawing plans in invisible ink, while your doubters nap beneath fluorescent lights in cubicles they loathe. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't even fast. There were nights when the silence in my one-room apartment pressed against my ears like cotton soaked in doubt. Bills mounted like enemies at the gate. But even then, the idea never left me. I saw it. This living, breathing entity that could change things. I didn't want a piece of someone else's dream. I wanted to architect a world where I set the rules. And now the same voices that once rapped doubt around every sentence say, "Good morning, boss," with mechanical politeness and lowered gazes. They wear collared shirts embroidered with a logo that I carved out of loneliness and rebellion. They slide into meetings and wait for my approval before pitching ideas I would have given away for free a decade ago. I walk into rooms where silence greets me like a royal procession, and eyes flick toward me, calculating whether their words will align with mine. Power isn't in yelling. It's in knowing that every decision you make changes someone else's life. It's strange how they've rewritten history in their heads. They talk now as if they always saw the potential, as if they believed in me when belief was currency and they refused to spend it. I don't remind them. I don't gloat. But inside, I catalog every name, every phrase, every smirk. I remember who called me crazy, who scoffed at my ambition like it was a symptom of immaturity. I remember how they said I was arrogant to think I deserved more, how they told me to stop reaching like a child chasing clouds. The very people who once said, "Don't embarrass yourself," now adjust their tone when speaking to me, weighing each word like it might tip the scales of my favor. They sit in ergonomic chairs that I paid for, in glass offices I once envisioned in half-sleep between work and exhaustion. And every polished report they hand over is one more unspoken apology they'll never say aloud. But I don't need it. I don't want it. Their apologies are echoes I already buried beneath layers of code and spreadsheets. Funny, isn't it? How dreams masquerade as insanity right up until the world starts bowing to them. What they called delusion was discipline. What they laughed at was legacy. And now, as they type emails beneath the glow of screens funded by my risk, I sip black coffee and watch the skyline they once swore was too far to touch. Every office light in this tower flickers with the story they tried to rewrite. But I know the truth. I lived it. Alone. And I wear their disbelief like armor now. Success doesn't come with trumpets. It doesn't arrive wrapped in glitter or heralded by applause. It creeps in like a sunrise on a winter morning, slow, quiet, and undeniable. Before anyone notices, it's already changed the landscape. And that's exactly how it happened with me. The noise of doubt faded, replaced by the sterile hum of fluorescent lights in an office that now bore my name on the entrance glass. I had built a kingdom from ignored emails, unpaid invoices, sleepless nights, and the stubborn refusal to give up when logic insisted I should. There's a different silence in power, not the hollow kind that filled my apartment when I was bootstrapping the first iteration of the platform, but a deliberate, watchful silence. The kind that settles into a room when people are trying to read your face before they dare speak. I walk into conference rooms now and eyes dart up from laptops like they're watching a hawk circling overhead. I don't need to raise my voice. The weight of what I've done speaks for me. But what they don't understand, what they will never truly grasp, is that none of this happened by accident. They think I got lucky. They say it behind closed doors, dressed as jokes or envy-laced compliments. Right place at the right time, they mumble, pretending not to see the blue veins of effort that run beneath every inch of this empire. They weren't there when I pawned the last of my electronics to fund the first production run. They didn't watch me sleep on cold floors in rented warehouses, surrounded by cardboard boxes and prototypes that didn't work yet, but might, just might, if I could crack the code before dawn. They don't know the terror of looking at a dwindling bank account while pretending confidence to a room full of investors. The art of bluffing stability when your personal world is crumbling. I've walked into boardrooms wearing the same shoes I duct-taped to hold together. I pitched ideas with breath that still tasted of ramen noodles. And even then, I looked them in the eyes and said, "This is going to change the game." Not because I was sure, but because they needed to believe I was. Now they greet me with rehearsed smiles and tailored suits. They schedule meetings weeks in advance, hoping to claim an hour of my time. The same people who once laughed at my ambitions now slip into hallways whispering about how visionary I've always been. Their memories are convenient. Mine is perfect. I remember every patronizing smile, every side-eyed comment, every casual dismissal that tried to reduce my potential into something more digestible for their comfort. When I speak now, the room leans forward. I can feel it. Attention, once denied, now forcibly tethered to my voice. It's not because I demand it. It's because they know I built something they couldn't. My company is not a product. It's a monument to the years I bled into late nights and pixelated screens. A cathedral constructed from the bones of my failures and the fire of my perseverance. They like to think the transition was clean, that I went from crazy to boss overnight. But nothing about it was clean. Success is violent in its making. It claws through your identity, reshapes your friendships, devours your weekends, and spits out a version of you that is stronger, but lonelier. You start to see the difference between people who clapped for you and people who clapped because everyone else did. I've seen them, those former classmates and distant cousins, sliding into my inbox with words soaked in admiration. Always knew you'd do something big. No, they didn't. They knew how to disappear when it got uncomfortable to support me. They knew how to watch silently when others mocked. But now they reintroduce themselves like I'm the one who forgot. Like they weren't among the crowd calling me delusional. Let them talk. Let them rehearse their proximity to greatness. I've learned to let silence answer for me. My buildings speak. My employees speak. My quarterly growth charts speak. Every automated process, every line of optimized code, every client whose life was made easier by the systems I built, they all echo louder than any voice that ever told me to quit. Still, I don't sleep easy. Not because I'm afraid of losing it all, but because I remember the hunger that built it. That hunger still whispers to me, even in this skyscraper with floor-to-ceiling windows and a private elevator. It tells me not to settle. It reminds me that the same people who cheer now will turn silent again the moment I stumble. And maybe they will. Maybe that's the rhythm of their existence, to orbit other people's fire but never spark one of their own. What they don't see is that I'm not trying to prove anything to them anymore. I stopped needing validation the moment I signed the papers to acquire the company that once rejected me for an entry-level position. I own what they never thought I'd touch. I lead what they never thought I'd enter. And the irony doesn't escape me when one of them brings me coffee, stammering through their words, eyes unable to meet mine. I let them fumble. I don't interrupt. The silence that once choked me now belongs to them. But I'm not done. Not even close. This building, these employees, this status, they're milestones, not the destination. The real prize isn't wealth, it's dominance. It's knowing that I've not only arrived, but that I'm setting the course others now follow. My former doubters now shuffle beneath deadlines and strategies that bear my fingerprints. They operate inside a reality I authored. The grind never ends. The hunger doesn't die. It evolves. Today, it whispers about global expansion, about technological disruption, about eclipsing every competitor who ever looked down their nose at me. It tells me to build higher, move faster, think 10 steps ahead of the ones who now look to me for their daily bread. So I do. And every morning, when they line up to say, "Good morning, boss," I don't hear obedience. I hear apology. There's a moment that comes, not with fanfare, not even with relief, when you realize you've done it. The mountain you clawed your way up no longer looms above. It stands behind you now, conquered and forgotten by those who never dared to climb. And there you are, not breathless, not broken, but standing tall in a quiet that feels almost holy. It doesn't happen at once. It creeps in gradually, like dawn bleeding across a city skyline. The endless fight, the burning drive, the long nights laced with desperation, they all dissolve into memory. You wake up one morning, and nothing aches anymore. No numbers to chase, no ghosts left to silence. Just the truth, steady and undeniable. You won. I remember that moment. It wasn't a dramatic crescendo, it was Tuesday. I had just stepped out of a sleek black sedan, its doors whispering shut behind me as if they knew not to interrupt the silence I had earned. The sun hit the side of the tower with my name carved in its skin. 16 floors of steel and glass, each one built on nights of starvation, on sacrifice, on unshakable belief. Inside, people were already moving, organizing, executing, shaping the world according to a vision they once mocked. And I, once the punchline to 100 jokes, now stood above them all, not to gloat, not to boast, but simply to exist as proof. The meeting that morning was different, not because of the agenda, not because of the attendees, but because I knew, before I stepped in, that it would be the last. Not a resignation, not a failure, just completion. I had built what I dreamed. I had achieved what I promised. The company no longer needed my fire to survive. It had become self-sustaining, driven by the systems and leaders I handpicked. My vision was now infrastructure. It lived without me. They were all seated when I entered, dozens of them, the once doubters now turned devotees. All eyes snapped up the moment I walked in. Not a single late whisper, not a glance toward a screen, just attention, unbroken and absolute. The room smelled of paper, coffee, and expensive perfume. A far cry from the musty corners I used to work from, where ambition was my only luxury. I looked at them all, department heads, analysts, architects of code, guardians of finance, and smiled. Not the performative kind they expected, a real one, software final. I built this company from silence, I said, voice steady, words deliberate. Not applause, not approval, silence. While you slept, I worked. While you partied, I planned. You saw nothing. I saw everything. And now it's here. Real, undeniable, thriving. Not because of luck, not because of shortcuts, because I refused to stop. They sat straighter. Some swallowed hard. A few shifted, uncomfortable under the weight of what they once denied. But it's time, I continued, eyes scanning their faces, noting the fear beginning to bloom. Not for collapse, not for crisis, for evolution. I've done what I came to do. Now it's yours to carry. Whispers didn't follow, only breath. The collective measured exhale of people realizing a shift had begun. I handed over the reins that morning, not to one person, but to a team. A council I had groomed for years, teaching them not just to think like me, but to think beyond me. They weren't replicas. They were revolutions in their own right. And they knew the blueprint because they had watched me draw it with blood. After the meeting, I returned to my office. Top floor, corner window, skyline, spread like a canvas. The view I once dreamed of as a child staring through rusted fences. I sat in the leather chair that once felt too big for me and turned it toward the horizon. No tears. No doubt. Just silence again. But this time, it was peaceful. I thought of them. The ones who doubted, who sneered, who turned their backs. Their voices were faint now, distant echoes drowned beneath the hum of my empire. Some had stayed, buried in cubicles under my logo. Others had vanished, still chasing the ghosts of their own abandoned dreams. I didn't hate them. I didn't even resent them. Their disbelief was never my burden. It was my fuel. I reached into the drawer, pulled out the original sketch, the first concept I'd drawn on the back of a receipt, frayed and faded but still intact. That was the genesis, the spark they all laughed at. I looked at it for a long while before slipping it into my jacket pocket. Outside, my driver waited, unaware of the finality of this exit. The lobby greeted me like always, receptionist with a bright smile, guards with subtle nods, passing employees straightening their backs. But this time, I didn't walk past them as their boss. I walked past them as a legend. The world didn't stop. The streets were still crowded. People were still late. Life still pulsed through the concrete. But I walked slower now. No longer chasing, no longer running from obscurity. I had turned madness into method, dreams into doctrine, and isolation into legacy. I had nothing left to prove. They called me crazy once. They said I'd fail, said I'd fall flat and come crawling back. Now they tell stories with my name in them. They quote me in meetings. They hang my words on office walls. They say boss like it's a prayer, but I don't need their voices anymore. My story has already been written across skylines and stock indexes, whispered in corner offices, taught in classrooms. It began in silence and ended in mastery. I left the building that day and never returned, not out of regret, not out of bitterness, but because my work was finished. My name was etched in places that couldn't be erased. My echo didn't need my presence anymore. And as I vanished into the flow of the world, unnoticed by most, I smiled, because they were right about one thing in the beginning. I was crazy. Crazy enough to believe I could become everything they weren't. Crazy enough to make it true.